or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, 'cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, on fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, 'cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, on fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
all in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, 'cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, on fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, 'cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, on fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. The Eye Test with Pierre, McGuire, and Jimmy Murphy.
The Stanley Cup winning Colorado Avalanche. And after 22 years, Raymond
The sickest NHL podcast. It's gonna be sick.
And welcome to another edition of the Eye Test here on the Sick Podcast Network. He is Pierre McGuire. I'm Jimmy Murphy, and we continue our Metro Division preview today. We will look at the New York Rangers and the Jersey Devils, the Hudson River battle. And we feel that those two teams, I think we're in agreement, could be right at the top of this division, battling for first place. And Pierre, let's start with the Rangers. Let's look at that New York Rangers team right now that seems to just get to the, except for the year they lost to the Devils, they've been going to the conference final 2 out of the last 3 years, but they can't get past that point. What needs to happen for them to get over the hump and get back to the Stanley Cup final?
Yeah, before we get going about the Rangers, let's talk about what happened the other night between the Rangers and the New York Islanders.
Oh, yes. Yep.
Scott Mayfield, who's a real good player, obviously an important player for the New York Islanders, open ice hit on Filipino. Eventually, Heedle gets hurt, and he's been hurt a lot. Obviously, hopefully it wasn't a concussion because that's something that's really been causing him problems. It might be a lower body injury. I don't know. I don't know if they're reporting correctly or not. But Ryan Lindgren went and challenged Mayfield and, obviously ended up on the wrong side of it and has a pretty bad shoulder injury from what it sounds like. And if they're missing him and they're missing Filipino, all the expectation in New York changes if those guys are gone long term.
Yeah.
All of it changes. And they can try to spin it any way they want. You don't win games with spin control. You win games by playing on the ice.
Mm-hmm.
But those two guys, that's significant if they don't start the season with the Rangers and it lasts more than a month.
Yeah, and Pierre, with Lindgren specifically, it's just been such a rash of injuries for him over the last few years. Obviously, look, we love the style he plays. We want every player to be out there playing like him and to give it all and stick up for his teammates and do that. But because of his size, it takes its toll. And we've seen this happen with other players in the NHL. And, you got to wonder sooner or later when this body is going to really break down. And I hope it's not now, but it's something that I think is probably in the back of the head of Rangers management and the coaching staff and his teammates right now.
I would agree. But here's the one thing. When they traded Rick Nash to Boston, Lindgren was part of that deal. Yeah. And a big reason why he was part of that deal was because they had Adam Fox. Mm-hmm. And he and Adam Fox played World Junior together on a gold medal winning team. Yep. And so that's really smart managing.
Oh,
it's really, that's Jeff Gordon. Jeff Gordon and John Davidson. What?
That's right. You just said by Jeff Gordon. I was just pointing that out.
What's your internet, by the way? Because your Wi-Fi is no good. You're picking me off on that.
All right.
Freeze all the time. Anyways, all I'm going to say is that's really good managing. It's good by John Davidson. It's great by Jeff Gordon because they recognize a trend.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of respect for that. I really do. I think it's great. But Lindgren, now the injuries are starting to stockpile, and that's tough. And I'm just asking the question. It's a question. When you're playing against your rival team, like the New York Islanders playing against the New York Rangers, should you have artillery in the lineup so that there's a nuclear deterrent if something happens? I'm asking the question.
I would say yes. I would say definitely yes. And
so given like Ryan Lindgren doesn't have to do that job?
Yeah. And given the way that season last year progressed between a lot of those division rivals, specifically in the Metro Division, I think that, that became a common theme in the second half of the season here on the Eye Test, us talking about the heavyweights starting to enter that division and a lot of old school hockey starting to happen there. Mm-hmm. Knowing that, and then seeing what teams did in the offseason and knowing that it's going in that direction even more this season, I'm 100% in agreement with you, Pierre. But, you can't change the past. So hopefully they can learn from that lesson going forward. But I look at that D right now for the New York Rangers, and you lose Lindgren and all he brings there, a good steady presence. Who's going to replace him there? Who's going to bring what Ryan Lindgren brings to that Rangers blue line while he's out, and God knows how long he's out.
Yeah, Trouba will. But here, and it's a great question, Jimmy. It's a fair question. Not picking on anybody. It's a fair question. Mm-hmm. Trouba will. I think Keandre Miller can bring some of that too. He's a big person. I think he's going to have a much better year, a breakthrough kind of year. Keandre, that is. But we forget one thing. It's very convenient now. All of a sudden, everybody's talking about, oh, Jacob Trouba, this. They tried to trade Jacob Trouba. They did.
I know.
You don't think Jacob Trouba knows that? He knows it. He's very well aware of it because he had to sign off on it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a player on a team and you know that management and probably the coaches wanted to move you on, how do you think you're going to feel?
Yeah. I mean,
he's a pro too, Jimmy. He's a pro.
Yeah,
I give him full. Like, Jacob's a pro, but you don't think a human being's still going to hurt a little bit from that?
Well, I think specifically in general, I would say, yeah, you hurt, but like you just said, he's a pro. But this situation became very ugly in the media and amongst the fans. So I think it took a bad turn, and I think it stings more than it usually would any pro athlete who, that can happen to. I think because of the negativity that derived from it, because of some of the shots that were taken at him and his wife, which I think was completely classless by fans. I think that is what's really sticking with him right now, Pierre. But if I'm Jacob Trouba right now, and I want to keep my career, he basically, Pierre, we mentioned this, I think it was last week or the week before. He basically knows the writing's on the wall. This is it for him there. He's gone from the Rangers after this year. He knows that. And he wants to win with this group because he loves his teammates. But also, wouldn't it behoove him now to seize this opportunity to step it up even more in Lindgren's absence so that his value goes up going forward to get to another team and maybe to dictate where he goes in the following season? That's the way I would look at it if I'm Jacob Trouba.
I will cede you that point. I agree with what you just said. Now, I think if they don't get off to the start they want,
well, all bets are off then. Okay.
Then that changes what you just said. But I would, where we are right now, your point is well taken. One of the things I like that the Rangers did this year is bringing in Reilly Smith. I know he had a down year last year in Pittsburgh, but I can tell you, first of all, I watched him when he was a young kid playing in Miami of Ohio. Obviously watched him in the NHL a lot, did a lot of his games. When he was playing in Vegas, I went out and specifically scouted Reilly Smith and Jonathan Marchessault because both of them had the potential to move on at some point, not too far down the road. And both of them have. Reilly Smith now on the second team since leaving Vegas. He was in Pittsburgh last year, New York this year. Jonathan Marchessault, he's obviously in Nashville. So our spidey senses were pretty good back then that both of those guys were going to eventually move on, and they did. So when I did my scouting of both those players, and a lot of it, Reilly Smith was the more complete player. He didn't have to score goals to help your team win. Jonathan Marchessault had to score goals so that your team could win. I think Marchessault, in the situation he's in Nashville, it'll be perfect for him, Jimmy. Perfect. Because I think he will score, especially with the depth and the way the team plays, and Coach Burnett has him going. I think Reilly Smith helps the Rangers a ton because he doesn't need to score to help them win. Panarin's going to score. Kreider's going to score. Trocheck's going to score. Zibanejad's going to score. Reilly Smith's going to chip in some goals. And I think for the Rangers anyways, don't discount two young guys there. Brennan Othmann, you saw him play the other night in Boston, and Brett Berard. I know both those kids really well again. They're both good players. I think Berard, in particular, a kid that played at Providence College and was a teammate of Matty Beniers with the South Shore Kings before they both matriculated to the national program. I think both those guys could eventually help the Rangers. So I know that the Rangers have some stuff going on with injuries and everything else, but I do think there's more positive than negative there.
Okay, injuries aside, what would make this season go sideways for the New York Rangers? I'm just saying they're just healthy, but what would they not be doing with a healthy roster that would make this season go sideways?
They didn't check hard enough, and they weren't hard enough physically. And checking hard and being hard enough physically are two different things. Checking hard is about persistence, knowing where you are, angling people, closing down your lanes, making sure you're putting pressure on the puck carrier. You don't have to obliterate. Being hard enough is different. Taking a hit to make a play, fighting through a check, battling in the opposition slot without taking a penalty, being aggressive on the forecheck without taking a penalty. So they're two different things, but they sound the same.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't do both those things well, I think that's when it goes off the rails for them.
All right. And my final question on them, and we'll get to the New Jersey Devils in a bit. Pierre, you go back to last year, they lost to the Florida Panthers, as we know, in the Eastern Conference Final. Are they good enough to knock off the champs this year? On paper. We'll just look at it on paper.
I think on paper is fair.
Okay.
On paper is fair. I think the hiccup could be what Jersey does, because Jersey made a lot of changes, and a lot of their changes address those two things I talked to you about.
Yep.
Being hard enough on checking and being hard and being physical. So they did some of that stuff. So that's going to be the one hesitation I have on New York Rangers, but I think they're positioned really well. The only other thing that I'm concerned about them, Jimmy, and I don't know the kid as a person. I know him as a player, Igor Shesterkin. Because of
read my mind.
because of the contract stuff.
Yep. I was just going to go.
I don't know the person. I don't. I know the player. I don't know I don't know. Does that affect him? Does it not affect him? How's he going? What happens if he goes into a 5-game, funk? Can he get himself out of it because all of a sudden the pressure of the contracts? That's the only other thing I think for the Rangers. Besides that, I think they're positioned really well.
I'm with you on that. And yeah, that's the one thing I do worry about too. I know that he says, look, I want to shelve talks once the season starts, so it won't be a distraction. But he's human, Pierre. I mean, how many times do we hear players or coaches or management say, oh, it won't bother us, it's nothing, and we'll leave it to my agent and the GM. I have nothing to do with it. What do you mean you have nothing to do with it? It's your contract. It's in the back of your head, in your brain, whether you like it or not. How much you can block it out, well, that's a whole other story. But don't say that, you're not thinking about it, because you're a human being. And of course, you're going to think about it.
This is the most important thing in terms of advice I would give young players and their parents. The agent works for you. You don't work for the agent. So if something's going on that you're not comfortable with, you got to stand up and say, no, that's not what I'm comfortable with, because you work for me. I don't work for you because I pay you. You don't pay me. Jimmy, I'm very comfortable telling you this. I've had agents when I was coaching, and I've had agents when I was in broadcasting. And the agent works for you.
Yep.
Agent works for you.
That. So let's go to that team that you think could be in the way of the Rangers returning to that conference final and potentially the Stanley Cup final for the first time since 1994. And that is a team that they've got a long history with, and 2 years ago upset them in the first round. And that's the New Jersey Devils, Pierre, who I think you'd agree with me had the best offseason on paper. Addressed all their needs. And I think the biggest one isn't necessarily the one that everyone's going to be talking about in Jacob Markstrom and the goaltending. I'm not discarding how big of an acquisition that was, because goaltending was obviously an Achilles heel for them last year. But I think the biggest thing with the New Jersey Devils is something you already referenced. And I'm going to go back to last year. And I've been thinking about this all day, preparing for this. And it was something that went through my head a lot. When everyone's saying, well, we'll excuse the Devils. They were missing Dougie Hamilton. Dougie Hamilton is an amazing player. Don't get me wrong. He's probably one of the most skilled defensemen in the National Hockey League, and he's probably one of the most skilled players on the New Jersey Devils. However, Dougie Hamilton isn't what I thought the New Jersey Devils were missing other than goaltending last year. It's everything you just referenced a couple questions back that you said the Rangers need to have, and that's grit. That's physical play, that's staying within your structure and bringing it every single night, no matter what the score is, no matter what part of the game it is, just guys that are going to come in and be those heart and soul type guys. And I think Tom Fitzgerald did a great job of acquiring that and putting more of that into his lineup. And one guy I know people say maybe he's too old and maybe he's slow, but I think he's going to help him a lot. And that's Brendan Smith. I love what he brings. I love what Brendan Dillon brings in this regard that I'm talking about. I think that was something that Fitzgerald knew. He told me straight out he wanted to get grittier, and I think he went out and did a great job of addressing that.
Well, getting Brendan Dillon helps. Getting Jonathan Kovacevic helps. Getting Stefan Nason helps. Getting Brett Pesce helps a lot. They're all big guys. Paul Cotter's a big guy. They got him from Vegas. Getting Dawson Mercer signed before camp starts, that was really good. You know, they're going to miss Luke Hughes in the back end.
Yes.
You know, what's that, 4 to 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, 4 to 6, 8, 6 to 8, who knows? But they're going to miss him. That's where Seamus Casey comes in, maybe from the University of Michigan, undersized defenseman. He's not as good as Luke Hughes. He's not as good as Lane. I'm having a brain cramp. He's not as good as Lane Hudson. I was going to call him Lane McDonald. Lane Hudson up in Montreal. But no, I mean, you know, that's where Casey probably has to fit in for them. But they've addressed getting bigger, insulating their smaller, skilled forwards. And I think Tommy did a really good job. I think, and I told this to Jimmy before we came on the air, this is a huge test for Sheldon Keefe.
Mm-hmm.
This is a massive, massive test for Sheldon Keefe. And if he passes it, Tommy looks like a wizard, and Sheldon deserves all the accolades. And if he doesn't pass it, Tommy could be in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we agree. And look, we're both very fond of Tom. We consider him a friend. But reality is reality. It's, you know, this is part of being a GM right now, and he knows that. And that's why he went out and did his best in the offseason. This is a huge year for the Devils. I think, Pierre, it's conference final or bust, at least for the New Jersey Devils. I don't think the second round is good enough. I really don't.
I understand where you're coming from on that. I really do. I totally understand. I'm not comfortable with that. And the reason I'm not comfortable going there, what happens if they get just a terrible first round matchup? You know, what happens if they get a whack of injuries like Detroit did with Dylan Larkin last year, and that one player, let's just say Jack Hughes goes down for 2 months.
Okay.
I mean, all that planning goes out the window because you saw what happened to Detroit, and Detroit had a deeper team last year than I think Jersey.
Yep.
Look what happened to them. One guy goes down for 2.5 weeks, and they missed the playoffs. So
I get it. I see what you're saying, Pierre, but I also look at it, you know, ownership may say, hey, that's part of the game.
Yeah, so I'm not arguing that point. My point is, say conference final or bust, that's pretty deep because I think Toronto's saying the same thing. Okay. What do you think they're saying in your backwoods there in Boston?
Oh, I know.
What do you think they're saying?
Yeah.
Conference final or bust, probably.
It just shows you how tough the East is. It's crazy how tough the East is.
So all I'm saying is, like, look at the teams. What do you think they're saying in New York with the Rangers?
Yep.
You know, start going around the Eastern Conference. What do you think? What do you think Eric Tulsky told the owner when they moved on and chose him to be the GM? Well, I'm going to get you to the conference final and maybe deeper.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's what they're saying. So, that's a big ask. I would say get out of the first. I think the biggest thing for them is get out of the first round.
All right. After last year, make the playoffs maybe. But, yeah, get out of the first round. You look at that roster right now, Pierre. Is there a young – I want two questions. Young player up front that you want to take another step, that you think it's really important for the team that he take another step, and a young player in the back end that you think is important?
So I think Mercer's he's a good player. He's a really good player. He can play center. He can play wing. He should have man muscles now. You know, he started in the league really young. He's been put through the ringer right now. They signed him. They didn't sign him to a long-term deal. They signed him to a bridge deal. So he's got a lot to prove there too. And I'm hoping for him because I really like him as a player. He's a throwback kind of he reminds me, when I watch him, he reminds me of Dougie Gilmour. You know,
wow, that's high praise.
Yeah, no, I'm telling you, that's what like the way he carries himself, the way he stretches around he reminds me of Dougie. And you know, Dougie was a great player, coached in the league, drew up plans to try to shut him down. He was unbelievable. I have so much respect for Dougie Gilmour and the way he played in the league. And Mercer kind of reminds me of him. Doesn't mean he's as good. So I'm expecting him to have a bigger year offensively. On the back end, Luke Hughes is going to be really good. Kenny Danico would probably tell you the same thing. Luke Hughes is trending the right way. And Kenny does all their games. And, one of the few guys that has his number retired in New Jersey. And I'm a big fan of Kenny as a person and for what he did as a player. And he would probably tell you the same thing that, Hughes is one of those guys that's going to be really special, but he can take another step up, and I think he will.
Let's hope he bounces back from that injury there.
Yep.
And then, finally we look between the pipes and Jacob Markstrom. They wanted him forever last season. I mean, Fitz was telling me, and it went back to, American Thanksgiving where they started targeting him. But if you recall, Pierre, that's when Markstrom actually went on a tear. And Calgary was looking at it, well, I mean, we're not out of it yet, and we still have a chance. Maybe we can make it. And so they're not going to move him at that point. But good on Fitz to stay with it, to keep calling Craig Conroy. What do you think now? Keep circling back and circling back and circling back. And finally, they get him this past June. How much is he going to help the New Jersey Devils?
He will help them if he played like he played in Vancouver near the end. He'll help them if he played like he played at the beginning in Calgary. So, yeah, he'll help them. And Jake, let's not forget Jake Allen's there too.
He's going to go there too.
Jake is a great running mate. He's an amazing person and a great running mate. So, no, I think their goaltending is not going to be an issue, which it has been. But I don't think that will be a problem for them. My concern is just making sure Jack Hughes stays healthy, and you made the great point. Luke Hughes comes back 100%. And they can fit all these new bodies in where it works. And, maybe Dawson Mercer takes another step offensively.
I'm glad you I was going to mention Jake Allen too. We don't script this, but we're always on the same wavelength. Jake Allen too. I don't know if you saw Pierre. He did an interview up in Montreal the other day when they played a preseason game there. And I loved how he apparently he was training there until July with a lot of the guys on the Montreal roster. But just the way he's keeping tabs on a lot of the young kids that he was trying to be a mentor to or be a good teammate to in Montreal. And I'm thinking as I'm reading these quotes from him, praising them. I think Montreal's ready to take the next step. I really love the youthful enthusiasm they have there. And I'm thinking that right there is really going to be a great thing for New Jersey Devils in that locker room, because he is kind of that big brother type player, and every locker room needs that. And he's a dependable backup too. He's a dependable 1B if it needs to come to that. So I think he's a sort of an under the radar pickup that everybody forgets because they finally went out and got Markstrom, but he's going to help the New Jersey Devils a lot too in so many ways.
He's got something that very few guys in that room have. He's got a Stanley Cup ring.
Mm-hmm.
Named on the cup. So that helps a lot too. I agree with everything you said. I've known Jake since he played for Montreal Juniors and played in the World Junior for Canada. So I'm a big fan of him.
Do you remember what he did when they were playing the Blues? The Blues were playing the Bruins, and what he was doing in practice to help the Blues?
No.
He modeled Tuukka Rask. He studied film and did his best to be Tuukka Rask in practice to help the shooters on the St. Louis Blues. I thought that was brilliant. I'll never forget that. And that's just the type of player he is.
I remember the story now that you bring it up. I definitely remember the story, but smart. But Jake's all about team. He'll be the last guy out there. So Jacques Cloutier, that's a name that unless you're in Buffalo or Colorado, or Quebec, he was the most amazing guy because he would stay out till the cows come home taking shots. Mm-hmm. That's Jake Allen. Yeah. And they're so popular with their teammates because of that. Yeah. They'll just stay out and stay. They'll get hit in the head and they won't complain. They'll just stay out and keep taking shots because they're team guys. And Jake is that. Jake is all of that.
Are there any guys, Pierre, because you would know this better than me, because you always get your tab on the prospects, but are there any guys on either team, the Devils or the Rangers, that maybe aren't going to make it out of camp, but you could see finding their way into the lineup as the season goes on, whether it's via injury or whether it's because of merit?
There's a defenseman for the Rangers, comes out of Nebraska, Omaha, Vince Mancini. He's good. He's rangy. He's big. He's long. Played last year in Nebraska, Omaha. Rangers signed him, brought him in, finished the season in Hartford, did a good job. Paul Mara works with the defenseman there in Hartford and did a real good job with him. And then up front, I think Brennan Othman, I talked about it before, and Brett Berard are two young players that I think could help the Rangers. If
But
they
you
need
see them coming out of camp, correct? You think potentially?
I think afterwards. I'm not sure.
Oh, okay, so a little more.
I think afterwards that I think they'll have a chance. Jersey's interesting. Hard to say. The one thing I do know, Kevin Dineen coaches in Utica, and he's really good. I watched him because when my boy was at Colgate, I'd go watch Utica a fair bit, and now he does a really good job there with their players. So they don't have a lot of prospects, but they've got some, and if they're ready, Kevin will have them, more than ready to play.
Yeah. Why isn't he in the NHL yet, Pierre? I think he should be behind the bench.
Comfortable. You know what? I think he's really comfortable. His son plays at Yale, and so he gets an opportunity to go see him play.
Because of the schedule.
His wife stays, where their summer home is. I'm not going to disclose the location because it's not fair to the family, but it's not that far from where Utica is. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff, but at some point, I think he'll get another sniff if he wants it.
All right. Good stuff. All right. Well, let's get over to our Q&A. And before we do, let us tell you about Betway, your leading global online betting and gaming brand. I'll tell you what, if you're a baseball bettor, I hope you went to Betway today and you bet the Oakland A's in their last game ever in the Oakland Coliseum today. I remember watching some back in the 80s, the Bash Brothers, all those teams. I'm sure you remember some teams before that.
Oh,
right?
listen, I remember. Dennis Eckersley, Sal Bando, Vita Blue. I can go down the line of the old Oakland A's with all the big mustache, roly fingers. They were quite a collection of eclectic humans, and they fit perfectly in Oakland, California. And they had white shoes, and white cleats, and their owner was really unique. And Charlie Finley, I got. As a kid growing up in Montreal, that was probably, besides the New York Yankees, that was probably the only team I cheered for outside of the Montreal Expos because I was just a gigantic Expos fan. But I used to cheer for Oakland and I used to cheer for the Yankees.
Did you ever see the Seals play?
Oh, yeah. Saw the Seals. One of the guys what's that?
Where'd they play, by the way, when they were in Oakland?
In the Coliseum in Oakland.
Okay.
In a rink in Oakland, but I never saw them play live. I saw them play in Montreal. Like I remember Joey Johnston was one of the better forwards they had back in the day. Number 22, I think he wore. He was an amazing offensive player. Worked his tail off. I worked with Joe Malash, who was a goalie there. Had a chance to spend time on the road with Teddy Hampson. One of the nicest men I ever met on the road was the late Carl Vadnais, who was a big player for the California Golden Seals. So I have really good memories of the Golden Seals. And again, owned by Charlie Finley, they wore white skates. They wore white skates. But the Teddy Hampson story is one of the best of all time. So Teddy still works. He's a scout. He ran St. Louis's scouting forever and ever and ever. And he and the late Patty Janelle are larger-than-life figures out in Western Canada when it comes to playing and scouting. And they both played for the Flin Flon Bombers back in the 1950s. And so they were a major A team then. And Flin Flon, all the players in Flin Flon were promised, this was a 6-team NHL. It was hard to make the NHL, 6 teams. And I remember sitting around, I don't know if we were in Saskatoon or Regina after scouting a game. They were telling me a story that all the players in Flin Flon were promised jobs in the mine for life if they won the Memorial Cup. So the late Patty Janelle and Teddy Hampson were telling me this story. I'm like, really? Wow. And they did win the Memorial Cup. And the coach of the team that they beat was Scotty Bowman, coaching Montreal's team, but it was whole Ottawa back then. and so all I heard is we were guaranteed lifetime jobs in the mines.
Wow.
So, I've been to Flin Flon a couple times. And it's a hardy community. It's a very hardy community.
Pierre, who was the guy we had on last year that had a connection to there?
Well, just some of the better players from there. Bob Clark, he's from there. Still has a home there, by the way. He goes there in the summer. The late Jerry Hart, the smaller, undersized defenseman that played for the New York Islanders. he still had a home there. But again, Teddy, my tie-in besides Bob, in particular, Bob Clark, was Teddy Hampson and the late Patty Janelle. They used to tell me, regale me with stories about Flin Flon. I really appreciated them, really did.
Well, you got to think that they're going to want to win that final game there in Oakland. So I hope you got one in on that. And as we speak, it's 2-0 Oakland there in the fourth inning. So there you go. But let me tell you more about Betway. Betway is the leading global online betting and gaming brand. Follow your gut instinct. Go with Betway. Go to betway.com or scan that QR code right in front of you right now if you're watching here on YouTube and join the action. Must be 18 plus and play responsibly. And of course, let's talk about Homage. Homage specializes in ultra comfy, high quality looks, repping sports. I saw some cool Oakland A's ones that they have, actually. Old school stuff. Pop culture and more legendary moments. Learn more about Homage with the link in the description. And who else we got, Pierre, that I'm going to be using on that trip to Northern Ireland? Oh, that's right. Manta Sleep. Go to Manta Sleep right now and go get yourself the only mask designed and optimized for deepest possible sleep in any environment. 100% blackout for deeper sleep. Infinitely adjustable for personalized fit. Absolute comfort. Visit mantasleep.ca and use the code SICKET. That's SICKET for 10% off. And speaking of Northern Ireland, Pierre, we're getting excited. Every day I wake up, I keep thinking about it. I can't wait to get over there for the Friendship 4. And again, we want to give a big thanks to our good friend, Sarah Stanton over at Cara Travel out of Quincy, Mass. Check them out online. And also to the gentleman that you were with yesterday at breakfast.
Yeah, Robert Fitzpatrick and Stevie Thornton and Martin McDowell. Looking forward to seeing those guys. I was texting with them after our show yesterday, and they said, can't wait to show you and Jimmy Belfast. I said, I can't wait to get there. Looking forward to it. We'll be at the Harp Bar, by the way, doing our podcast. For those that are watching overseas right now or are planning on coming over, we'll be at the Harp Bar. And then before that, on Monday, we arrive Monday morning at 8:30. Jimmy and I are actually going to take the train out to Kildare, and we're going to go to the Bister Collection, which is a huge high-end shopping situation. They have shopping villages in 9 different cities in Europe. We're going to go there and going to be doing a roundtable, and we'll actually be doing our podcast from there on Monday, and then the rest of the week we'll be in Belfast. So my biggest thing is I got to control Jimmy. We're in row 14 on the plane, and I'm giving him the window seat, and I'm taking the aisle.
And Pierre, you know what I think would be great? Besides getting some amazing guests connected to the Friendship 4 next, from the teams that are participating, we got to get one of the bands in there.
Two bands are going.
Okay. Which ones are they?
Merrimack and BU.
Okay.
So they got 2 bands going. And so that's going to be great. That's going to be fun.
It'll be a great atmosphere there. It was funny. Last night, I'm kind of scrolling through Instagram, and I don't know if they must just, they know. Big Daddy's always watching. And all of a sudden, all this stuff about Belfast that's coming up on my Instagram as if they know I'm going. And there's a place right downtown there. I forget the name of it now. I'll get it for us. But they have Irish step dancing contests. And it looked awesome. And they've got all the music going and everything. I can't wait. Can't wait to get over there to Belfast. So,
Robert and Martin both told me that the thing about the Harp Bar that's really cool, it's got some of the best live music in all of Ireland, not just in Northern Ireland, in all of Ireland.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Good stuff. Maybe we'll see Van Morrison over there too. All right. Next question. Well, let's get to the Q&A right now. What do we got for the first question? Randy Workman, Pierre and Jim, who is the best defensive forward in the NHL? Ooh, right now?
I'm going to say either Sasha Barkov or Hanse Kopitar. It's hard to pick. They're both virtually the same.
Yeah.
One's got 1 Stanley Cup and one's got 2 Stanley Cups. So they're both outstanding. If Bergeron was still in the league, I'd probably put him in that category. But if you were to ask me, the best matchup guys in the league, Kopitar and, I think Barkov are the 2 best right now.
Would you put Brad Marchand in the top 10 defensive forward?
I've always said that. I've always considered him to be a top 10
underrated defensive forward.
I remember when I was working on national TV for NBC, and I said that Marchand's one of the best defensive forwards in the league, and people were like, No. And I'm like, you want me to show you tape? I'll show you like a 5-minute sequence of tape. You know, I'm down there at ice level all the time, and he drives guys nuts, especially star players for the opposition.
Yeah.
You know, he's a tremendous defensive forward. You know, Jordan Stahl's another one now that I start. But, you know, is Jordan as good as Anse, or is he as good as Sasha? I don't think he is, but he's still a very good defensive forward.
Well, I want to go to something about that, and that's why I brought him up. Yesterday, after I think it was 2 days ago. No, yesterday after practice, Jim Montgomery was just talking about Brad Marchand and how coachable he is, and how, you know, he watches that sort of affect and influence the younger players, and how he tries to tell the younger players in camp, this is what you need to do. This is how you become a complete player in the NHL. So listen to this quote right now from Jim Montgomery about Brad Marchand.
Here and he's on a fourth line, works his way up over a couple of years to where he is today. A lot of us are looking at Lysell and Berkoloff as they fit in the top six or they don't fit. What's your read on it?
Well, I think that if you want to play in the NHL, you got to have the fiber to figure out how you're going to get the opportunity. To fit in the top six, no matter who you are, it's pretty hard to do. I don't even. You guys would know better than me, but Patrice Bergeron, I know he was 18, but he didn't start in the top six, right? You learn the details. You figure out, like, what do you have to do to have an impact in the game? Do you win one-on-one battles? Do you run someone through the wall? Are you become an elite penalty killer? Do you use your speed to have an impact in the game? Whatever your assets are, you can't be one-dimensional. There's got to be one dimension that separates you. And for a guy like our captain, Brad Marchand, it's his competitive fire. His second and third effort and fourth and eighth effort is beyond anything that I've seen on a regular day-to-day. And that's what separates him. And that's why he could be a fourth line guy and Claude Julien would love him. And then he could grow into a top six, number one power play guy. And Cassidy loved him. And I come here and I inherit a great player and a great leader.
And you know, that's what we're talking about right there.
Yeah, that's really.
I remember him when he first came in the league, Pierre. Nobody was pegging him people that watched him a lot like you, but in general, the general consensus was not that he would become a potential Hall of Famer like he has.
In 2007, the best world junior players from Canada, the U20s, played against the best world junior players from Russia. Okay, in an 8-game series, 4 in Russia, 4 in Canada. I did the entire series with Peter Labardius, who was, at the time working in Calgary. So we spent almost 17 to 20 days in Russia. We were all over Russia. And Brad Marchand was on that team, and he and Milan Lucic were unbelievable impact guys in that, okay? The series shifts to Canada. They played 8 games. Canada won 7 of the 8 and tied 1. But the last game of the series, because he had a tough game, and Brent Sutter was the coach. He wanted to send a message. He sat Marchand out in the 8th game in Vancouver. He sat him out, didn't play him. I'll never forget that. And I was curious how Brad would respond. And that year, if you remember, Milan, there were 2 players from that team that made the NHL.
Yep.
One was Gagne in Edmonton, and the other one was Milan in Boston. Brad went to the World Junior that year, and Steven Stamkos was on that team. Claude Giroux was on that team. Johnny Tavares was on that team. It was a murder roll of players. Canada won the tournament in Pardubice in the Czech Republic. Marchand was a huge impact. But you know what was great? Because you said it. He got sat out in the 8th game, okay, in Vancouver. He was phenomenal. That whole World Junior, he was great because he was coachable. Craig Hartsburg ended up coaching that team. Craig did a magnificent job, but Marchand never misbehaved that entire time because he learned his lesson in the summer. You talked about it. He's coachable.
Yeah.
And that's why what the coach said matters. He can be a 4th-line player. He can be a 3rd-line player. He can be a 2nd-line player. He can be a first-line player. Doesn't matter. He's not going to whine or complain. He's going to go play.
To help the team.
Yeah, he's about help. Now, has he made mistakes? Yeah.
Of course, yeah.
He'd be the first person to tell you. The stuff with Callahan, that was wrong. I did the game. I was there. I broadcast the game. That was bad. But he learned his lesson, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think he has many suspensions since. I think 1 or 2 since then. So he reeled that in for sure. All right, next question. A to Z me. Is Marchand a Hall of Famer? I certainly think he is. I think he's potential. I don't know. I wouldn't say for sure he's a sure shot, but I think he's definitely potential Hall of Famer.
I'm not going to talk about it. I can't.
Yeah, I know you
I'm on
can't.
the committee, so.
Yeah. All right, next question. Michael Dove.
Mhm.
Hey, gents, question. How does the loss of Drew Doughty, I'm glad you brought that up, change the Kings' outlook to start the season? Well, it's not good, that's for sure. They're going to need some of the young guys to step up here. I mean, I didn't even realize it, Pierre, until last night. I was listening to the broadcast. Dave Gosher I was doing the Vegas broadcast. And do you know all 17 seasons he's led the team in minutes? I mean, that's insane. 17 straight seasons, Gosher said, that he's led the team in playing minutes. That's
I didn't know that stat. That's a really good one.
wow.
So I'll take you back to the draft where he went number 2 overall. Number
yeah,
1
great
was
one too, yeah.
Stamkos. And both teams got it right. Both teams, the guys have won 2 Stanley Cups. Tampa's been obviously to 4 final, and LA's only been to 2, but it doesn't matter. When you think about it, what LA had to go through back in the early 80s, in 2000, from 2010 to 2015, Chicago was there all the time. So it was either LA or Chicago. And so they had to go through those guys. And Anaheim still had some jam to them, and Dallas still had some jam to them. So, it wasn't easy, but no, Tampa got it right with Stamkos, and LA got it right with Drew. By the way, I was talking about that team in Pardubice. Yep. Drew Doughty was on that team. Drew Doughty was in Russia with us.
That's right.
In the summer.
Yeah.
He was all part of that. So Drew was an unbelievably important player. Every team he's ever been on, Drew's been great.
Yeah. Well, I look at that team right now. That's one of those teams who we were wondering what their identity is, Pierre. Sometimes a situation like this is when you find out for sure. Sometimes your identity starts to take on itself, I think, because you got to figure out a way to work around this and get over this injury. So maybe we're going to see, you never want to see a guy get hurt, but I'm just thinking as we're talking about it here, maybe there's a silver lining. You never know. Maybe it unites them and they figure out a way to get through. It just depends how long he's going to be out. We don't know that yet.
We don't know that. Mikey Anderson's he's got a lot of experience now, Mikey, and he's played with Drew a lot. So he's one guy I was thinking right off the top. Jimmy Spence, another guy, undersized D-man. He's going to have to step up. And, I thought last year he was one of the best kept secrets in the league. I thought he did some really good things in LA. It's hard. You can't really replace superstar players. It's just hard to do. You can do it by committee for a while. I mean, in 92, we did it after Adam Graves broke Mario Lemieux's hand in game 2 of the second round. But when Mario came back in the Eastern Conference Final, we were a much different team. And he comes back and we already got a good team. Now we become an elite team, so getting those star players is really important. Getting them back is really, really important.
We're going to see what they're made of in the first month of the season here in LA. All right, next question. Michael Dove again. Pierre, with these rash of injuries in the preseason, is it time to reduce games and rules around who plays in the games? I knew this question was coming, Pierre.
Michael, I've been talking about this for a real long time, going back to when I, worked on TV, and I think yes, but I also think it's important for people to understand these budgets for a lot of these teams are really fine. They're really fine, and these preseason games matter for some of these owners. In terms of bottom line stuff, it does. And I know people are laughing. I know one team that's an elite team in the league. If they don't get past the first round of the playoffs, no matter what they do the whole year, they're breaking even. They're not making money.
Wow.
So the margins are really tight for a lot of these teams, and these preseason games matter for some of these teams. They really do.
Yep. All right, next question. John Smith, you're the GM of the Habs at the deadline. They're 2 points out and on a good streak. Are you buyers or do you stick to the plan? That's a great question, John.
I'm buying.
I'm buying.
I'm buying. 100% I'm buying. But
I think it's time.
What I have to give up, obviously. I'm not going to overpay and blow my plan up, but I'm buying. Again, I can speak to this from experience. I watched Craig Patrick manipulate the trade deadline unbelievably well. that won us 2 Stanley Cups in 91 and 92. He was the brains behind the operation. He did magnificent work. But what the key to Craig was, he could identify the organizational strength and the organizational weakness of the Pittsburgh Penguins. And when he did that, he knew, okay, this is what I can afford to spend to get Jimmy Murphy. If I have to spend more than that, I can't do it because I don't have the organizational depth. The key at all this stuff at the deadline, and this is where teams get in trouble, they don't understand their organizational depth because more times than not, they overrate it. They overrate it. Oh, so what if we traded Murphy? And then 2 years later, people are like, why did you trade Murphy? Because we didn't realize that we weren't deep enough.
Yep.
We didn't have guys that could replace Murphy. And all this, you got to be calm, you got to be cool, and you have to be realistic with yourself. So if you're asking me in Montreal 2 points out at the trade deadline, I would be a buyer.
Yeah, I'd be a buyer too. And I think, maybe by strategy or not, they have positioned themselves greatly to be in that situation now, Pierre, where they've got enough of the depth in the prospect system where they can trade a prospect. I'm not saying a superstar potential prospect, but they've really built up the farm for when they got to where they are now. And I think they're ready to take that next step.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to say that Jacob Fowler's Marty Brodeur, because he's not. I would never do that to a kid.
Yep.
Marty was special. And Marty knows. I tried to recruit him when he was 16 years old to come play for us at St. Lawrence. I've been watching him a long time. He was playing for a midget AAA team called Montreal Bourassa. He is really good, really, really special. But look what Lou Lamoriello did because he had Marty Brodeur. He took him 20th overall in the 1990 draft. Go evaluate all the goalies they had, whether it was Mike Dunham, Chris Terreri, Peter Sidorkiewicz. Go look at all the goalies they had in New Jersey. There was only one that stayed.
Yep.
And you know why he stayed and the other guys could go? Because he would use the goaltending position to increase his depth on defense or go out and buy a forward. Look, he had Dougie Gilmore in New Jersey. He had Joe Nieuwendyk in New Jersey. People forget this.
I know.
Like, how did he get those guys?
Yeah.
He had assets.
Yep.
So if you really want to study it, like how do teams figure all this stuff out? There's key positions. Center's a key position. You can't have enough depth down the middle. Defense, especially right-hand shooting defensemen, they're hard to find. Important. Depth and goal. If you can have depth in those three positions, you can go play at the deadline all you want and make your team better.
Yep. And I think the Canadians are at that point. All right, next question. Marvin Matthews. What's up, Marvin? Pierre, I know you've seen a lot of Coronado. Can he be a 20-plus goal scorer as a third-line player?
He sure can, but I think he's going to be a second-line player. And Matt's a real good player. I have so much respect for him. I've watched him run the gauntlet a lot physically, and he's a tough kid. He's a really tough kid, and he's not a cheap shot artist. He's a hard player. He's really talented. He's very coachable. He didn't pout last year. He could have stayed at Harvard for a third year. He turned pro after his second year. He didn't pout when he got sent to the American League, even though it's in the same city in Calgary. So it's not a lot of heavy lifting, moving, and having upheaval in your life. But he's a really good player. And the answer is I'll be disappointed if Matt's not a 20 to 25 goal scorer in the next 2 years, and maybe this year, obviously. And if he's not a 50-plus point player, I'll be really – because he's got that. He definitely has that.
Yeah, you can see he's got great hockey sense. All right, next question. Renaissance Resistor. If things fall apart for the Rangers, could you see Toronto being a landing spot for Trouba?
Could, but I would say Detroit more than Toronto. I could see Detroit.
Yep. All right, next question. Randy Workman. I wrote a blog about hit-to-the-head injuries about a year ago. At the time, it was a significant concern. I'm just wondering if the NHL addresses this issue enough. I think they've gotten better over the years, Pierre. I don't know about you.
No, well, I'm glad you said that, Jimmy, because I agree with you 100%. And I like Randy bringing that up and the fact that he wrote a blog about it.
Yep.
Things were different back, when I was in training camp with New Jersey or when I was coaching starting in the early 90s. Things were different. They're a lot better now. They're better for the players. I think the referees do a much better job. I think Bill Daly and Gary Bettman and the competition committee, and they do have that, have done a real good job addressing that or trying to make it better. But it's still, look at you, people are going to say you can't have it both ways. I'm not trying to, but the NHL can't stand for the no-hit league. Hitting's still a very real part of hockey. You just can't hit to the head.
Yeah.
Just try not to do it. There's sometimes where, unfortunately, it just happens. Guys are going so fast, it just happens. But more times than not, they can't. Guys don't want to hit other guys in the head. They just don't.
Yeah. I mean, was it you, Pierre, that you came up with the whole bear hug idea when a guy's running?
It wasn't me. I took that from Brian Burke. So
Okay.
Brian Burke had the best idea. And Berkey's idea was, and I don't know how much he shared it with other people, but when you go to engage in a hit in the corner, rather than just pulverize the guy, which is okay. I mean, sometimes that matters too. You wrap him up, but you can't wrap him up for 10 seconds. You get him, you put him in, you grind him in the boards. You can hold him for 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. Then you got to let him go. You just can't. And if you hold him for longer than that, then you're going to the box for holding. But if you engage that, you'd get away from a lot of the injuries that we're seeing right now with those poor defensemen. With zero tolerance and obstruction, and the goalies not being allowed to leave the trapezoid, these and no red line, these D men are exposed all the time. I would take the trapezoid out. Let the goalie play the puck. That would take away a lot of the injuries for the defensemen. I understand they want to have zero tolerance on obstruction. Okay, I'm for it. That's fine. I'll cede you that. So make a compromise. Just take the trapezoid out.
Yep. I'm with you on that, Pierre. And I think, I'll go back to what Don Cherry used to always say, and I think it still holds true, even more so because the equipment has gotten bigger and better but harder, is that, these guys are skating around at a high rate of speed with basically weapons on their elbows, Pierre. I mean, or on their shoulders. And I think at times the players, you get caught up in the moment, in the heat of the moment, you forget that. And on both sides, whether it's the player defending himself from a hit or whether it's the aggressor, they feel invincible. They think that they're invincible out there. And I think that mentality, I don't know how to get rid of it, but if we did kind of shrink that mentality, I think that would help as well, that you just respect, hey, when I'm going this fast with this equipment, I am a weapon, and I need to keep that in mind.
I'll tell you. On
the flip side, you don't want them to hesitate, right?
I'll tell you how you get rid of it. From the time they're young, stop putting them in full face masks. Cover their eyes, go down to their nose.
Yep.
Stop it, because kids learn early on they can use their head as a battering ram and they can dive face first in front of shots because there's going to be no injury. And it leads to a lot of bad habits. It leads to a lot. I'm telling you, you go watch a really fast, hard college hockey game, and you see the physicality of those games and how guys use their head like battering rams. They're fearless, absolutely fearless. It's crazy how hard the hits are.
I know. It's a great point. All right, next question. Alex Ivanowski. Everyone knows Michkov is going to be really good. Who else in the Flyers, young guys, are going to be really good players for them going forward? What is Tippett's and Frost's ceiling? Those are two guys I would have said, and I think they've got very high ceilings.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything. It'll be Michkov's going to be interesting because I do think there's going to be a learning curve for the small ice, and he's going to get a lot of attention. I think Tippett could be huge. I think Tippett could, if he plays with the same size and tempo that we saw through portions of last season, could be very good. I'm talking about a 70 to 90 point player. He really could be. He's got that potential. Morgan Frost is a kid I've always liked. I liked his father. I still like his father, but I liked his father a lot. Andy, he was the PA announcer in Toronto for years and years and years. What a nice man. I had so much fun talking to him over the years. So Morgan's a good player. He's just got to get harder, I think. And they've got, I don't want to overrate any of their young guys, but they got a whack of young guys that I think are going to be good. What they have to hope is Drysdale on defense, who they got for Cutter Gauthier.
Yeah.
They got to hope he stays healthy, and they got to hope he pans out to be a top 4 guy. And if he does, they're going to be good.
Yeah, that came up. I think it was when did they play in Montreal up here? Was it Monday up in Montreal?
Well, so it would have been, Monday night, because
Okay,
Wednesday
so
they
in
had a
his
game. Yeah.
his pregame skate.
Tuesday. What? No, Monday, Tuesday. Monday, Tuesday they played, and then yeah.
Yeah,
You're
it
right.
was, they had the skate and they brought the Gaudreau's father out. But after in his press conference, I was listening and watching it. He also was talking about Drysdale. And he said, look,
Okay.
with the wheels this kid has, there's just no reason he shouldn't be lighting it up out there and producing more offense and just really going right through that neutral zone. So he said, we're going to have to take him in. We're going to have to, he didn't say the word re-coach, but just coach him and coach him more. And I just love the way he talked about him, that he recognized that potential's there. And he admitted, hey, yeah, I know he's had health issues. So that's kind of stalled his growth, but he could have something there. And towards season.
I go back to watching him play when he was a peewee. He played in Toronto, and he was a really, really dynamic player. I watched him in the Brick tournament, and he's always been a really good player. Just he's been hurt a couple times now, and you start to wonder, as a smaller guy, like, is that going to be long term or not? And I would say this: if you told me Drysdale and Lane Hudson at the same age, who would I prefer? I would prefer Lane Hudson.
Yeah.
But Drysdale's very similar. They're very, very, very similar. I'm telling you. If Drysdale stays healthy, and he's got, what I think of Lane. So if he does, I think the kid could be really good. But I worry about his health. Everything else is elite, I think.
And just going back, one more thing on Philly too, they have some goaltending coming up the ranks too. So that's good for them as well. So you're in good shape. All right, next question. Alex Ivanowski, how come on the PP some teams still refuse to put left shots on the right and right shots on the left when they set up the umbrella? I just feel like the one-timer on both sides opens so much up. Totally agree. Yeah,
so there's some coaches that they just don't. You know what the argument is from most of the coaches, that they say, well, it's too easy for the defender to get in the lane. And I'm like, why don't you talk? And I say this to the coaches all the time. Why don't you talk to somebody that's had to get in the lane against Alexander Ovechkin and see how much fun it is?
Costa now.
But just, Robert Bortuzzo would be an amazing person to talk about this, because he's made an NHL career and he's a Stanley Cup winner.
Yeah.
Going out and being the guy that gets in the lane on those one-time shooters, you got to be absolutely fearless. But I would hate to see what his body looks like. I mean, he's got to be broken.
Right.
And I have so much respect for Robert because of the way he played. Ian Cole's another one of those guys. They're valuable guys. But I tell you what, I agree with Alex's point. You have those one-timers in the flanks. It opens up so much. It opens up the time.
It really does. I'm with him. All right, next question. Red question: what is Michael Hage's upside in comparison? Well, we addressed this, I think, a couple days ago. We like it a lot.
Huge upside. Can't wait to watch him play at Michigan this year. Got to think he's going to be a world junior player. I'm really, really excited to watch him.
Character kid too, by all accounts.
What's that?
Seems like a good character kid too.
High character. He's been through a lot, family wise, and very high character person. So I'm excited to actually watch him at Michigan this year. I'm really, really excited about that.
All right, next question. Sean Myers, hot fudge sundae or apple pie? I'll do apple pie.
I'll do the apple pie as well with some chocolate ice cream.
There we go. We're gonna have to have some apple pie in Belfast.
That was good. That was good.
Good way, and that's the final question. It's a good way to end it. Now I'm hungry.
Oh, that was great. That was really good.
Well, thanks to you guys out there for your questions, and obviously for listening and watching, whatever you've been doing or both. And thanks to Shane, our wonderful producer up in Montreal. Tomorrow we got a great guest there.
Joey B coming on.
Yep, veteran goaltending coach Joe Battaglia. Was commissioner of Hockey East. He's huge in New England, where I'm from. I used to see him around Sports Etc. over there in Arlington a lot. And he's from Arlington, my hometown. Really looking forward to that. Love to talk to him about college goaltending as well, and just how many good goalies there are now coming with the ranks.
Hey, don't forget, he was a goalie at Harvard too, Joey B.
He was a goalie at Harvard.
He was a goalie at Harvard. So his life in hockey has been unbelievable.
Great.
He wrote a book called Ring the Bell. It's about the Friendship Four. I have it in my possession. It's an amazing
And
read.
he's
It's a really, really good
part of the
read.
Friendship 4 too, so everyone knows. We're really looking forward to working with him on that. So
Yeah.
Joe Battaglia for On Campus Fridays tomorrow. He is Pierre McGuire. I'm Jimmy Murphy. This has been another edition of the Eye Test on the Sick Podcast Network.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Eye Test with Pierre McGuire and Jimmy Murphy on YouTube, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.